Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order. The Northeast Neighborhood Alliance is now opening up for a candidate forum for District 10. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. Raul. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you joining us this evening. The candidates who have agreed to participate in this meeting tonight include Emily Norwood, Councilman Clayton Perry, Gabriel Gregory, and Ezra Johnson. Welcome to all of you. We haven't heard from Emily yet, but we know she's going to be checking in here, we hope, pretty soon. Just for your information, for the folks that are watching this evening, Alex Suela, who is also a candidate for the District 10 position, told us this weekend that he would not be participating tonight. The way we're going to operate this event this evening is to go through the list of questions that our neighborhood leaders have given us, and also, of course, some of the classic questions that we've done at every one of these type of forums. And we'd like to, if we can, limit the answers, candidates, to approximately 2 minutes. And Councilman Clamp, who you can see is there paying close attention, he will be putting up a hand signal when that it is time to cease. So I hope you will be looking out for him after you know that you've spoken for about 2 minutes. What I'd like to do now is essentially begin in the order that the candidates appear on the ballot. Unfortunately, Emily hasn't checked in yet, so we'll skip to the next candidate on the ballot after Emily Norwood, and that is Clayton Perry. So Councilman Perry, you'll get the first question, followed by Gabriel Gregory, and then Ezra Johnson. All right, the first question for you, sir, is please tell us how you are qualified for this job, and do you really have time to perform it?
Great question. Thank you, sir. Well, it does come down to experience, and I have that experience. I started after my college degree at Texas A&M. I went into the Air Force and spent 21 years in the Air Force as an Air Force civil engineer, basically doing the same kind of things that I'm doing today on council. And that gave me a whole heck of a lot of experience that I've used through my entire life. After I retired from the Air Force, I went into the private sector and did basically the same thing I did in the Air Force. So I had both the government side job and then I had the private industry side job. So I've had both sides, and that gave me contracting experience on both sides of the house. And then after that, I totally retired in 2013. But I got here to San Antonio in 1991. That's been such a long time ago, I almost forgot. But got here in 91, and I started my city experience of San Antonio as soon as I got here. I joined my HOA board of direction and got reelected into the board several times. And then I became the president and got reelected several times as president. And then I moved into the NNA, Northeast Neighborhood Alliance, and was on that board of direction also for a number of years. And also during that time, I was assigned to several boards and commissions on the city. The Building Standards Board, that I became the chairman of that board. I was on the Sign Standardization Committee. And then I was also on the 2017 Bond Committee that was in charge of the streets and sidewalks. So all of those things really prepared me for the council job. And that's where I am today. And I'm sit on a number of different boards and committees on city council also. So That's what qualifies me for this. And I'm a full-time employee of U District 10 residents. I don't have any other job. This is my job, and this is why I can get out all across District 10 and do the things that I've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. We now move on to Gabriel Gregory to talk about his qualifications and whether he's going to have time for the job. Gabriel?
All right. Well, really briefly, I just want to thank the Northeast Neighborhood Alliance and particularly Councilman Gallagher for reaching out for the opportunity. For those who don't know me, my name is Gabriel Gregory. I am an Army Reserve officer and platoon leader at Fort Sam Houston. I'm an organizer and a service industry worker. So I know what it takes to lead, but I also understand what it feels like. And a lot of people can resonate with the idea of making ends meet and what it feels to get by. And when I meet neighbors on the doors, a lot of folks believe that now is the time for a new generation of leadership. I'm a graduate of MacArthur High School here in District 10 and St. Mary's University on the west side of San Antonio, where I went through the ROTC program. And I want to revert back to my role as a platoon leader because I'm responsible for, and potentially in hazardous scenarios, hopefully not anytime soon, 22 lives in my platoon. And I would like to point out that Councilman Perry and I are the only people on the ballot in this election in District 10 who understand the command authority that comes with that responsibility and that role. I will say that I believe now is the time for a change in District 10. I believe that we need to prioritize issues that have been neglected, and I can commit to you that I will be a full-time councilman. I do not personally agree that one should have a job other than being the councilman unless it meets certain qualifications or standards. But yes, I will be your full-time councilman. I believe we need the energy in a councilman to prioritize community members and really expand on relationships across District 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. We now move on to Ezra Johnson. Ezra, talk about your qualifications and whether you really have time for this job. We've got to check your vocal. We don't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the Northeast Neighborhood Alliance for putting on this forum. My name is Ezra Johnson. I'm an educator, attorney, and community leader that wants to bring a people-first approach to our local government. I'm a lifelong resident of San Antonio. I am a state administrative law judge, and I am an adjunct professor of law at St. Mary's University, where I teach Texas criminal procedure. I'm also the immediate past vice chair of the VIA Board of Trustees, the VIA Metropolitan Transit Board of Trustees, where I was the chair of the Accessible Transit Advisory Committee. And on that committee, I revamped and reworked our paratransit service. I'm also the immediate past chair of the VIA Audit Committee, where I helped oversee a $250 million annual budget. On my time on the VIA board, I initiated or helped to initiate the VIA Link program and spearheaded a vote on significant additional funding for VIA Transit. As president of the El Dorado Homes Association for the past 4 years, I helped restore our pool and our playground, and I put the organization on a more stable financial footing. So much so that the District 10 office now has other neighborhood groups call me for advice on those issues. I've worked hard over the past 4 years to become an even more qualified candidate for District 10. I am the only candidate in this race that has significant small business experience. I have actually run a small business. I know what it takes to operate a small business, and I know that our small businesses are struggling and the help that they need. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the San Antonio Express News, and I think I've gained a track record of getting things done in the organizations that I have led, and I want to use that experience for the benefit of my neighbors in District 10. I have spent the last 4 years rearranging my financial circumstances so that I can indeed be your full-time council member, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you very much, Ezra, for those comments. We'd now like to move on to the next, and this is really a big picture question that sort of goes along with what you've all just talked about, and that is, why are you running now? Why are you running? And we'll begin with Gabriel. and go through the ballot numbers that way. So go ahead, Gabriel. Why are you running for this office?
Thank you, Councilman. Well, first, I want to point out that it's my opinion that experience, while important, does not always equal proactive leadership. You know, when I meet residents on the doors across the district, uh, the thought comes to me, we don't need to be a small business leader. We don't need to, frankly, served in the military. We don't need to be a currently employed individual or a homeowner or a renter to listen to those who are. We don't need to be something to listen to our residents. And that's the job as a councilman, as I see it, to represent those who are in the community, our neighbors on the dais at City Hall. That's the priority. And the leadership traits that come with serving certainly translate to being on the job. I'll say that my priorities in this campaign from the beginning have been COVID recovery and relief for workers and for small businesses and locally operated businesses. We went for months on end with businesses shutting down and being closed. I supported bars being open and restaurants being open as long as they followed COVID guidelines. I want to prioritize housing first policies that keep families in their homes and provide permanent resources to homeless residents without exhausting our tax dollars. We know we can do that instead of spending millions of dollars every year on Band-Aid fixes. And I want to prioritize veterans. We're Military City USA, but it's not enough just to put signs up to advertise that. We need to hone in on educational and professional opportunities. And on day one, I want to introduce a policy for currently serving enlisted members and veterans to funnel into a workforce training program of their own and partner with big businesses across the district. And I will say this, I am, and you'll probably ask it later, but I am supporting police accountability on this ballot. I do not support defunding our police. I proudly wear a uniform myself, and I am thankful that we have officers in District 10 protecting us every day. And I'll get around to more information on that at some point, but that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. We now move on to Ezra Johnson to answer the question about why are you running?
Thank you, Mike. I've considered public service to be an ideal to live up to ever since I worked for Henry B. Gonzalez. But public service did not become a true calling for me until I worked for the Via Metropolitan Transit Board of Trustees. When I discovered that we had many residents who were dependent upon transit, who could not afford a monthly bus pass, a $38 bus pass, but needed to use the bus every day to get to work and were therefore spending more than $38 in a month, I realized that there was a need there, an important need, a small need for an individual, but a great need over the broader community. And I worked with VIA staff to find ways to where we could do what's called fare capping, where we could track how much people spend on transit so that once they reach the $38 for the monthly pass, they don't have to pay anymore. It was a small bore thing that I think will make a big difference when it's fully implemented. That's when the light bulb really came on for me. And I realized that there are all kinds of opportunities in City Council to do achieve similar positive goals. This is an incredibly consequential election for San Antonio's future. We need to be coordinating with all levels of government to provide further economic assistance for renters, property owners, and small business owners. A new police contract is being negotiated. Our new workforce development program needs to be implemented. The city budget process starts up almost immediately after the election, and we need greater oversight over our public utilities, SAWS and CPS. I think that right now leadership in District 10 is too focused on other issues and are not focusing on those issues. And so that's another reason why I have decided to run in this race. I believe we have longstanding issues that need a proactive leadership. We need to elect a new council person who realizes that, providing basic good quality services is the floor of what the city should do. And I think it should be a ceiling.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. Time is up now. And let's move on to Clayton Perry on the question about why are you running?
Well, I'll tell you why I'm running is because I still have a lot of work to do. I still have a lot of work to do for this district. And I'm running on account of the things that I have done for District 10 and the city as a whole. My top priorities haven't changed since 2017. And it's interesting to hear whether that should be a floor or ceiling. I think that's what we should concentrate on, or is what the city charter actually spells out for the city to follow. And the top three priorities that I have gotten consistently from District 10 residents are safety and security, infrastructure, and property taxes. That's been my top three priorities since 2017. And as I say, I haven't changed my stripes, and I won't change my stripes, because those are still the things that people are concerned about. Yeah, there's a host of other concerns out there as well, like homelessness. And I've done a lot for homelessness here in District 10 by hiring a clinical person to go around and actually guide those homeless people to the different agencies where they get direct help from. But the top three priorities, let me just real quickly tell you what I've done. Safety and security. I spearheaded the effort to hire over 300 police officers that we were short. Those were vacancies. I got them filled over 4 years. I also established a homestead exemption, something that this city never had before. And now we have a homestead exemption. Granted, it's at the lowest level, but it's something to build on from here on. And that's what I want to continue to do on council, is build that homestead exemption to where it is very, very meaningful for people that are struggling to pay those higher property taxes every year. And finally, infrastructure. I led the effort to double the amount of money this city puts towards roads. It was around $60 million when I first got on council. It's at $120 million a year now. So that's what people really want. They want good streets. They want safety and policemen. And oh, by the way, we're at one of the lowest per capita for policemen here in any major city in Texas. And I'm going to work on that to get more policemen on the streets as well. And so those are some things that I need to work on and want to continue to work on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Now we're going to move on to one that I know I've been getting a lot of questions on, and I'm sure all of you have too, and that is, how do we vote on Proposition A and Proposition B? We need to discuss what those really mean for the city, Prop A and Prop B. And I apologize for having to make you do it in such a short time, but we've got to get through this one because everybody needs these answers. And so we'll go ahead and start, let's see, with, I guess it's Councilman Perry's turn to begin this. Oh, it's Ezra's turn?
I think it's Ezra's.
Oh, I apologize. You're right, it is. I've got it marked down there. Okay, Ezra, you get to answer, are you in support or against Prop A and Prop B, and tell us why.
Well, I'm very much in support of Prop A. One of the things I learned on the VIA board is that San Antonio has two problems. It has a housing affordability crisis, and it has a transportation affordability crisis. Right now, 75% of San Antonians are spending at least 25% or more of their income on transit and transportation. And that means access to opportunity. That means that we have a pay-to-play economy in San Antonio. If we can reduce transit cost burdens, we can also reduce housing cost burdens. Housing cost burdens affect us in the same way. The reason why I'm in favor of Prop A is because I think we need an all of the above approach to addressing housing affordability in San Antonio. Right now, housing prices are through the roof. If anybody's looking at real estate right now, it is getting to be a little bit crazy. The ability to afford a home is under attack in San Antonio, and we need to take proactive steps to increase the housing stock in general and to increase the affordable housing stock. And that's what Prop A will do, and that's why I am very much in favor of it. On Prop B, my concern is that Prop B takes away fundamental rights from workers without any corresponding gain in civil rights. And so I am not supporting Prop B at this time.
Okay. Okay, Councilman Perry?
Yes, sir. I am totally against Prop A, and here's why. It's basically giving the city council a blank check to spend bond money on anything they want to, including affordable housing. And if it's not unconstitutional at the state, we can write a check to anything we want to do here in this city. And I'm totally against that. Those bonds were set up to fund our infrastructure needs. Right now, we got $3.5 billion worth of backlog in streets, parks, drainage, and all that. And to take a portion out of our bonds now to give to affordable housing or whatever they want to spend money on is taking away from those much needed projects that we have lined up and ready to go already, but we just don't have the funding for it in our yearly budget. So we rely on bonds. And now we're talking about reducing our bond capability by funding these other projects. And affordable housing, look, everybody would love to have affordable housing, but are you willing to use your tax dollars, taking it away from infrastructure projects that bonds were initially set up for, and pay for housing or fixing houses, paying for roofs of houses? That's where all they're talking about is affordable housing and where your tax dollars would be going to. The federal government gives us hundreds of millions of dollars every year to build affordable housing. And basically what that's doing is giving tax breaks to those developers and lowering the price of the houses so that the occupants or new occupants can afford to stay there. So it's a different way of saying that, but no, I do not support Prop A because it's going to reduce our capability to fund a lot of street projects, drainage projects, something that's really needed here in San Antonio. And it's going to divert money away from those. So that's why I'm against it.
And we've got to hear your answer to Prop B. So.
Oh, Prop B, I'm sorry. Totally against that because that will lead to defunding the police, basically moving money from the police department into other agencies within the city or maybe even outside the city. So I am totally against that as well. Don't let them fool you. It will draw resources away from our police forces, and that will basically kill our police force. That will have a lot of retirements coming out of the police force, and it's going to be hard to recruit and train quality individuals in the future if this thing goes through. So I'm against that one as well.
Thank you. Okay, Gabriel, your position on A and B.
Thank you, Councilman. Well, I think this is such an important question, and it goes back to why I'm running, because we are one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. We have to be conscious of the changes that we need to make in that circumstance. I am absolutely for Prop A, and it's not just because of housing affordability. I think the council needs to be able to make decisions that affect our entire community as we continue to grow. And yes, with respect to Councilman Perry, in 20, 30 years ago, the argument about the city charter, I believe, is much more valid. But as we are facing the challenges today, I think that we need to make sure that people have the ability to afford a house, afford a home, not end up on the street before we prioritize a sidewalk. I want to see someone in a home more than I want to see someone on a sidewalk. As for Prop B, yes, I am proud to support Proposition B. And the councilman is absolutely wrong. This has nothing to do with defunding the police, and that's why it's not written in the proposition on the ballot. It's interesting that he says we have less police officers on the street per capita, because if we take this first step to move toward a meet and confer process, we can actually negotiate increases in pay, better benefits for officers, as we see in other major cities in Texas, like Austin. And yes, if you look at cities like Dallas, you have more officers on the street per capita. So we can accomplish those things regardless of Prop B passing. And it's even more interesting that my other opponent mentions there's, quote, no corresponding gain in civil rights. I'd like to ask him to reflect that opinion to the 60% of District 10 residents and the overwhelming majority of San Antonians who support accountability, more accountability in the police. And yes, the people of color who are in District 10, who I speak with every day, who want to just see accountability, they're going to call the police when something goes down, because we all support the police. And I want to be clear that I am absolutely pushing for a farther northeast substation. I'm pushing for mental health increases for officers and firefighters who may have PTS, and we want to make sure they get help. I wouldn't be saying that if I weren't supportive of our police. And I just want to thank those who do serve on our street in San Antonio.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. I think it's only fair that we give the two other candidates an opportunity to give a follow-up on the comments that were just heard. Ezra, did you have some comments you'd like to make?
Well, I would just say, at least on Prop A, I do take issue with something that the councilman said. All that Prop A does is it gives the city the authority to put things on the ballot for the voters to decide. There's no blank check. Ultimately, the voters will decide what gets bonded and what doesn't, just like our standard bonding process. So to me, it's another example of the fact that I don't think Clayton Perry trusts the voters of District 10. To Mr. Gregory's point, right now, all Prop B does is it takes away collective bargaining rights. It doesn't change anything of the underlying structure of the statutes that govern civil service protections. I am in favor of reforming those protections, and the way to do that is through council, and that is what I will do.
Okay, and Councilman Perry, did you have any comments about what you've heard on Prop A and B?
Sure. On Prop A, it absolutely is a blank check. And it's not that I don't trust the voters. It's the direction of the city council that guides the voters and recommends to the voters what they want to do on all of these bonds, as they have in the past. They don't show individual projects in these bond packages. They group them in groups. And so you don't know unless you go digging down into what those individual projects are. And the city council can add anything they want to. Like I said, it's a blank check and group it in groups, and that's what goes to the voters. And I absolutely trust the voters here in District 10. Just as I'm running, I'm trusting them to make the right decision on who's going to lead District 10 in the future. So yes, I still don't agree with that, and Prop A should be a no vote. On the B again, look, our policemen and firemen lay their lives on the line every day. When they put on that uniform and go outside their house, they are putting their lives on the line, and they should have that right. I'm normally not in favor of unions, but I am in this case. They deserve the right to negotiate a fair compensation package that includes medical, it includes their salaries, it includes retirement, of which, by the way, they contribute to as well. But they go out there every day and risk their lives, and they should have that opportunity to bargain with the city in coming up with a fair compensation, because I certainly am not out there on the line. You're not out there on the line. They are, and they know what their requirements are and what their needs are to support themselves and their families. So yeah, I'm against Prop B too.
Okay, Gabriel, you've heard now the remarks concerning your remarks. Did you have any further remarks about this particular Prop A or Prop B question?
No, not pointed at my opponents, but I will just say that, one of the other reasons I'm supporting it is because I just believe that the chief of police ought to have the authority to remove a bad officer. It's not an easy decision to make. We already deal with a retention issue. We trust him to lead our SAPD. I want to trust him to make that decision.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel. Let's move right along now. This next question's a little bit selfish, but it's because it's from the Northeast Neighborhood Alliance, and that is, I've received a lot of concerns about neighborhood security efforts and what ought to be done. Safe Officer Program, the COP program, and so forth. And I'll go ahead and start with you, Clayton Perry, on your thoughts about neighborhood security.
Well, number one, I want all of our neighborhoods to feel safe. I want them to feel safe walking down their sidewalks and being able to sleep at night without anybody threatening them or their families. That's what we need. And you know what we need to back that up with? We need more police officers. We need more security up in this area. I've heard that over and over from people across this district. We need more police presence out there. We need more patrols. We need more of everything to combat that rise in crime. And let me tell you, there is a rise in crime here in this city, particularly violent crime. Our violent crime is really going through the roof, and I hate to see that. Nonviolent is actually steady. It's actually gone down a little bit, but we need more police officers out on the beat, and that's what I'm going to work to do, is continue to add police officers. Let's face it, and seeing about increasing that as well to provide that additional layer of safety and security out to our neighborhoods. And let's face it, most of District 10 are neighborhoods. We don't have a lot of businesses and big businesses around here. It's all neighborhood based, and that's what I have as my top priority, is to support our neighbors and give them the protections that they require. And by the way, they're also paying for. So let's loosen up a little bit, and let's support our police department more, and fire department, because they need to grow as well to get that safety and security out there. So that's my approach to it.
Thank you, Clayton. We'll now move on to Gabriel, your position on neighborhood security, safe officer program, COP program, and so forth.
Absolutely. I love this question. And I have to say, I agree with Councilman Perry. I would like to see more police officers on the street in District 10 too. And I think regardless of Proposition B, we can accomplish that. And I think that if Proposition B passes, I think we're one step closer to accomplishing that. I want to increase the SAFE program. I can't tell you how many neighborhoods I've been to where individuals don't have a contact for their SAFE officer or don't realize whether they have one. I think we all agree that we can improve that process and that program so that neighbors can connect with their local police when there's an issue. I want to advocate for the Far Northeast substation so that we can look into response times on the northeast part of the district, on the farthest northeast part of the district. I want to point out that I had a conversation with a police officer at SAPD just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, who told me that if we were to, expand mental health care access for these officers, a lot of whom are similar to the soldiers, some of the soldiers I know who don't want to get help. They don't want to get help because they don't feel that it will help, or they grew up in a society where they say don't get help, don't be in tune with your emotions. We need to let folks know that it's okay and that they deserve the help after serving in the way that they serve. And, I think that we don't talk about neighbors enough anymore. When I meet neighbors, there aren't a whole lot of people who participate in their HOA. There aren't a whole lot of people who know their neighbors that live next door to them. And I want to host community events in neighborhoods, directly in neighborhoods, not attached to any other organization or yearly event, so that neighbors can have another opportunity to meet each other and look for creative, modern, technological ways to connect people in their neighborhoods even more.
Thank you, Gabriel. And now, Ezra, if you'll go into the same subject and give us your position on it.
Thank you, Mike. I hope everybody heard what Mr. Perry said earlier, because on the one hand, he's saying he spearheaded 300 additional officers, although that was mostly a budgetary issue. And then crime still went up in San Antonio in spite of the fact that we added those 300 officers. What that has always said to me is that we need to work smarter, not harder. We need to work on prioritizing how we use the police force we have. Now, of course, San Antonio is growing. Our force is going to have to grow to meet that population increase. But clearly what this says is that just adding more officers is not going to bring down crime. The way we're going to bring down crime is that we're going to have to focus on what our officers work on, how they interact with citizens, and that means more funding for mental health response units and homelessness response units. On the specific issue of the Safe Officer program, that's another thing. We don't need just more officers. We need more specialized officers. We need to expand the Safe Officer program for our neighborhoods. And I know as a neighborhood association president, it's been very difficult to get the COP training for our residents lately because of COVID, but it's always been difficult to make that work for people's schedules. And so I'd like to work with SAPD to be more affirmative in how we go out and train people for the COP program so it's convenient for them.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. All right, moving right along, we'll now talk about one that a couple years back was extremely controversial, but it looks like it's quieted down a little bit, but still very important to everyone. And that, of course, are infrastructure improvements and mass transportation. So let's go ahead and address that. And it looks like, Gabriel, you're the first one to talk about that one. Infrastructure improvements.
Well, I'll bring up 2 points here. I think one, I'm actually a big fan of the representative project process that the councilman in District 9 uses when it comes to allowing the community to vote on projects that have been neglected. I've talked to a lot of neighbors in District 10 who want to have more of a voice and make sure that if 50 neighbors in their neighborhood have an issue with a street, that is prioritized with a vote over someone who is making back-end deals with developers or special interests or any other sort. We need to make sure that our community members, our homeowners, our renters, our residents are at the front of the table in that discussion and that need. I'd also like to point on mass transit, and my other opponent makes this point all the time. The councilman voted against the VIA expansion. If we're going to consider a growing city and we're going to take into account climate issues and the challenges that come with an increased population, we're going to have to expand on mass transportation. Now, I will say, I believe that we are, as a councilman, your job is to represent. The majority of District 10 voted on that proposition. So moving forward, I want to make sure that we're focused on making that program as effective as possible, and expanding on all of our sustainable ways that we can transport here in San Antonio. I think those are the 2 most important issues at the top of my mind.
Thank you, Gabriel. Okay, Ezra, your position on those.
Sure. Well, you're right, Mike. They're not controversial because 63% of District 10 residents agreed with VIA and with my efforts, specifically working with District 10 community groups to show them the value of additional mass transit options, both throughout the city and our unique VIA Link program here in District 10, which is something that I worked on specifically. Here's the thing on infrastructure. Right now, we are, Mr. Perry likes to brag about $100 million in maintenance funding for streets, which again was more of a budget process that was done through the equity lens than anything he spearheaded specifically. But it's never going to be enough. We have to find ways to reduce the strain on our infrastructure. We do that with a more comprehensive public transit system, and we also do that through thinking outside the box on getting people off the streets when it's possible to do so. I want to use CMAQ funding to encourage businesses to continue to allow their workers to work from home after COVID. That way we keep cars off the streets. We're not worried about whether or not transit is convenient. We just let people work from homes. I think ideas like that are going to help our infrastructure dollars go further. I agree. Infrastructure is, one of the basic services that the city has to do. It's something that the city has to do well, but we have to stretch the limited dollars that we have. And I want to make my focus to how do we stretch those dollars so we can spread our good infrastructure throughout the city.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. And Councilman Perry, your position on this.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Well, infrastructure, that's my background. And I have always been working very hard. And yes, it comes down to money. And that's how important the budgets are in working with the other council districts to get what we really need here in District 10. And that's what I've done over the last 4 years, every year. And I just, the infrastructure is so important to everybody. That's, the taxpayers, their tax dollars going into the system, they expect good roads. We've got over 4,000 miles of roads here in San Antonio, and 400 miles of those are F streets. That means they've totally failed. People aren't paying in their taxes for failed infrastructure. They want decent roads. And that's what I've been working on for the last 4 years. And it's showing up. I mean, if you drive across inside of 410, between 410 and 1604 and outside of 1604, you'll see some of those results on the road improvements that are going on right today because of what we've been doing on this last bond and what we're planning for this future bond and our yearly maintenance budget. So that's very important. And let me talk a little bit about VIA. The city, you and I are paying $10 million a year into VIA, and I supported that. Yes, I supported that, even though I questioned how they use that because I continue to see these big lumbering, huge buses going down our streets that are empty. And that's why I worked with VIA when I first got on council to institute this VIA Link system into District 10. I volunteered District 10 to go into that system. I thought that was out of the box thinking, and that's where we're at right now. And they are looking at expanding that across the city. So that's great. I support VIA with that, but I don't support all these empty big buses going all over the city. And that's where I think they need to look at more closely. And I've been after them for 4 years to do that. And that's what they need to pay attention to. How can let's think of something new, like VIA Link, something else to get those big buses off the streets, because that's not only running them empty, but it's destroying our streets as well with those. You can see the ruts from those big buses going down the streets, and that's tearing up you and my streets that we paid a lot of money to put in. And I question VIA on a lot of issues, like that park and ride that's on 281 north of 1604, $30 million, and it sits empty every day, empty. I've driven by a number of times. I've counted 4 cars on a couple of occasions, and 2 of those were VIA cars. It's empty, and that's a waste of money, and it shouldn't have happened, and they should have put those resources somewhere else to serve the citizens here in San Antonio better. And I recognize the requirement for public transportation. That's why I supported that $10 million a year from the city general fund going into VIA. And I will continue to watch VIA like a hawk, because I see a lot of money being wasted on things that really don't need to happen. So that's mine on VIA and our infrastructure projects.
Okay, thank you very much, Clayton. Now let's move right along. We've got to change the subject completely because there's something hanging over our heads that we haven't discussed yet, and yet it's probably had the biggest impact on our lives for the last year. And that is, of course, COVID-19. Could all of you give us what your reactions have been, of course, at the city level, but also even above that, as far as what is your perspective on how government has handled the COVID-19 crisis? And let's see, I guess, Ezra, it's your turn to start that one off.
Well, gosh, that's a lot to put into 2 minutes. So, I've served on the citizen committee that's been advising the mayor and the county judge on COVID issues, and I'm very proud to have represented VIA on that panel. I think our overall response needed to have a concerted state, federal, and local response, and that never happened. It's been everyone trying to figure it out for themselves. I think the city's done a fairly good job with limited resources in terms of our COVID response, but it of course could have been much better if that had been coordinated higher up. I think that there has not been enough proactive effort to let people know about all the programs that are available. On our first round of assistance for restaurants in San Antonio, only 12 restaurants in all of District 10 applied for that first round of funding. That says to me that the council office was not doing enough to get the word out and actually talk to people who actually needed these funds. We need to be doing more proactively to let businesses know what programs are out there. We need to work on getting more shots in arms. We've got all of this funding that's coming in. We need to spend that wisely, and we need to stand up our new workforce development program. That's how we're going to transition out of the COVID economy long term. I think we need somebody in council that takes that seriously and is going to make sure that those funds are directed where they need to go.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. And Councilman Perry, your position on how that the city and government as a whole has responded to COVID-19.
Well, number one, you're talking to a COVID survivor. I did catch it and I was actually hospitalized, but they took a great care of me there at University Hospital. So a plug for them. But I also want to recognize those that have passed away, our friends, family, neighbors across this district. A lot of people have passed away from this, and it was a very serious and still is a very serious virus. As far as the government reactions to this, yeah, there's been failure federal government, there's been failures from the state government, and absolutely failures here at the local government. I mean, we had very little say so as far as the city council. It was all being driven by the governor and then by the judge and the mayor. And I was unhappy with that. We got no say so on how we were reacting and what was being required of our citizens here that I represent here in District 10. The mayor and the judge basically took over and told the city and the county what we were going to do, and we had no input, and that still exists today. We still don't have any input from the city council, and although we have asked to be a part of that process, it hasn't happened, and I'm very upset about that. I think a lot of the resources that have come into this city, i.e. money from the federal government, and still going to be getting some, we've not paid enough attention to our small businesses. You know, there's a lot of people that are out of work still today, and that's because we've had a lot of businesses shut down. In fact, as of today, we have right at 39% of our small businesses that have closed their doors, totally closed their doors, and those people are out of work. My approach was to help small businesses and funnel more money into grants and low interest loans into small businesses instead of just saying, okay, they're closing and we'll pay those employees to stay at home and we'll put them on this EHAP program. And I supported that program as well, but not to the extent that we did. We never ran out of money in that pot, but we immediately ran out of money for small business support for them to keep their doors open and to keep their employees employed. And okay,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
that's where I think we needed to go with more small business support.
Okay, we're running out of time. All right, Gabriel, go ahead. Your position on COVID-19.
Yes, well, first things first, I agree with Councilman Perry that the city could have done a little bit more. There was a failure at all levels of government, and I think we were dealing with an administration that was, not willing to address the issue productively enough or proactively enough, and that trickles down to all of our major cities and all of our communities. I want to make sure that folks know that I was advocating for months for the food and beverage relief program that put millions of dollars into small businesses directly to give them the relief they need, that was supported by our service industry leaders here in San Antonio, which employs 1 in 7 workers in this city, even some in District 10. The councilman, with respect, and I'm sure he'll respond, sat on his signature on that council consideration request for months. If I was your councilman, I would have been pushing for that, pushing the mayor to get it on the agenda for a vote to give that relief. I want to make sure that folks understand, and Councilman, I messaged you, so I want to be clear that I'm thankful you're here. But look, we need a councilman in this district to follow science 100%. And when medical experts and Metro Health was saying we need a mask mandate, we still need a mask mandate. We need to make sure we are following guidelines. He agreed with the governor's decision to remove a mask mandate. That's unacceptable. I want to make sure that we're addressing the issues we face with our equity lens and the equal distribution of vaccines. It took way too long for our representative here in this district to advocate for a Northeast side vaccine site. I can't tell you how many neighbors I've met who have wanted a vaccine site on the Northeast side. And I want to make sure that on council moving forward, we have a plan for the future pandemic that will come, whether it's a year from now or 100 years from now. We can evaluate the lessons learned to perform an after action review and be prepared. And with that being said, not only for a pandemic, but for the other disasters that we need to prepare for, like the most recent winter storm, and what we can do to prepare our elderly residents and people with disabilities, particularly in District 10 in the future.
Thank you, Gabriel. In fact, I'm glad your last comment brings up probably one of the hottest topics that all of us faced recently, and that was the blackout of shutdown of utilities after the terrible weather conditions that we all suffered. And let's hear what your comments are on how that the reaction was and what ought to be done in the future to prevent the problems that I think everybody suffered. And Councilman Perry, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I've said it on record that this was a complete, utter failure in all three organizations. It was a train wreck, especially with respect to communications. And the train wreck was at CPS, it was at SAWS, and more importantly, it was right here at the city level. Because you know what? We own both of those utilities. We should have been grabbing them by the throat, getting them in the offices and sitting down and talking, number one, preparing for this. And then number two, how we reacted to it during the storm. And then number three, how we recovered from the storm. And so the mayor, he recognized my expertise and my background, and he actually appointed me to this special committee. It's called the Emergency Preparedness Committee that I meet every Friday at 10 o'clock. And you can watch it on TVSA every Friday at 10 o'clock to 12 about finding the facts. Right now, we're just looking facts on all three organizations on those three areas. What did we do? What happened during the storm, and then what happened after the storm on the recovery operations. So I'm on that committee. We're questions on that, and if anybody has any further questions, you can go on sanantonio.gov, find that website, and you can still submit questions as to why this, why that, or what happened here, there. So it's still open, and I invite everybody to come in and take a look at what we put together so far. It's very interesting, some of the parts that we've already uncovered, and we will continue to do that. And at the end of the day, hopefully we'll have some recommendations. But what it's going to take is resources and prioritization of what we want our utilities to do. But number one, the city should have taken the lead. They didn't. We sat back just waiting for SAWS and CPS to react. And of course, we know the failures on both of those. So I'm happy to be on that committee, and you can call the office if you got questions and can't find it on the website. And I'll certainly add those to the list of questions that we'll be asking those organizations.
Thank you, Clayton. All right, Gabriel, your comments on the blackout.
Sure. Well, I think it's important that we have a councilman in District 10 who acknowledges that we're going to continue facing these climate events. And we've known this for decades. And yes, it's on the city. Our leaders at every level should have been prepared for this event, because this is not a one-time thing. It's not an unexpected event. That's not true. We have known that these events were going to happen. They're going to continue to happen, and we need to be prepared. I'd like to see in District 10 us utilize the senior center, for example, or another location as a warming center. Should this happen again in the future, it should be power generated so we don't have to rely on any of the utilities to run it. We should have implemented VIA as warming buses in our local neighborhoods directly for people who needed warmth. And that wasn't accomplished. It took way too long for the city to respond. And look, I have to be honest. I think that is not just the mayor's failure. That's not the county's failure. That's on every single city council member who did not advocate ahead of time and during the storm. It took several days for the representative to get out there and distribute water for some photo ops. We need, I'm proud that before the storm, my campaign was out there giving blankets to homeless residents. I don't know how our council missed the storm warning, but us residents knew ahead of time. We did not do enough to address during the storm. And after the storm, I do agree. We need to have an after action review of the entire situation. I met residents I met a resident last week who almost died and had to go to the hospital because he relied on that electrical care for his health condition. We cannot afford another mistake like this. We lost 111 Texans as a result of the gross negligence at our top, in our state leaders at the top. We need to acknowledge climate reality. That's one reason I'm running for sure. And we need to be on the national grid. And I'd like to see the councilman advocate for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel. Now, Ezra, if you could finish up on the blackout points.
Sure. Well, I would just point out that that was the second time tonight that I've heard the councilman blame his failure of leadership on sitting back and waiting for information to come to him. Clearly, that isn't working. We need to turn that on its head. A council office should be affirmatively working to get information rather than waiting for it to come to them. And I'd also point out that Mr. Perry has not attended a single CPS or SAWS meeting at any time since he became a councilman. And so his concern after something goes wrong clearly demonstrates that we need a change in leadership in this district. As I mentioned, I was the chair of the audit committee for the VIA board. I have experience with audit and with risk assessment. I want to use that experience to proactively prepare our city utilities for the future disasters that we know are coming, rather than just sitting back and waiting for something to go wrong. So that's what I will do in order to prevent something like that from happening again. Certainly, there are other larger systemic issues that need to be addressed. And I think one of the roles of a councilman as a leader, again, is not sitting back, but is actually going out and advocating for us on a broader level. We need to be talking about the ERCOT system, and I think council should be at the forefront of that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ezra. We now have to wrap things up. We still have 17 questions to go, but we're not going to be able to reach them. And Larry Johnson just sent a very good one to us on supporting disabled folks and what you do when that they've got an unemployment rate of 60% right now. And I wish we could take that on, but I need for each of you to wrap up your comments and all the comments by the other candidates tonight. You have 1 minute and 12 seconds to do that, each one of you. And we'll go ahead and start with Gabriel. Just
Thank you.
wrap
I want
up
to
for
just
tonight.
recap by saying thank you again for hosting the event and for the work you do at Northeast Neighborhood Alliance. Really briefly, I want to address that question you just mentioned, and I'm proud to have been a part of a forum to address people with disabilities and folks who are strongly involved on that issue. I want to just point out that on my first 2 weeks on council, I intend to meet with leaders in the disabled community so that we can address what issues are being neglected and what we need to do to improve. But lastly, I'll say, look, no matter what we covered tonight, it's clear that there needs to be a change of leadership in District 10. We need proactive leadership. People are ready for a new generation of leadership, a leader who's willing to listen to them, even on the occasions we disagree, so that we can come to a common ground and work together. And we don't see that from our current council. And I would say it's not something to take pride in, to be the lone vote on every positive measure that comes to the dais in District 10. There are, policies that will positively impact residents in District 10. We need to focus on them. We need to prioritize COVID recovery. We need to prioritize housing first policies. We need to prioritize veterans and so much more. I'm asking for your support on May 1st. Visit votegregory.com for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Ezra, go ahead.
Well, I would also just say on the disabled community, I worked with Larry on the Accessible Transit Advisory Committee, and I would continue the work that we started there on day one. Again, this was a great forum. We actually got to talk about some important issues. But the thing I want to end with is this. The councilman himself, Mr. Perry himself, said that working with the other council members from the other districts is probably one of the most important things you do as a councilman, because the budget process is so important. I have always made that priority a priority. I have a history of working on a diverse board to get things done and pass positive things unanimously, and I will continue to do that as your city council person. And I believe that District 10 succeeds when San Antonio succeeds as a whole. These boundaries that we draw around our districts are important, but the problems and the challenges and the opportunities don't recognize those lines.
Okay, wrapping it up.
We have to do more, and I ask for your vote. Thank you so much.
Okay, Councilman Perry, you get to finish off the program.
All right. Well, thank you. And again, thank you to the NNA for hosting this tonight. Just, it's so easy to take pot shots at the people that are actually sitting in that seat and having to make those decisions on a day-to-day basis. But I do have that leadership. Spent 21 years in the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel. You don't get to that position. And then in private industry, leadership positions, you don't get into those positions showing that leadership. And I have shown that leadership by what I've accomplished on council for District 10. And just for Larry's comment, yes, absolutely. I actually got an award from the No Barriers Communications because I was the one that got the sign language interpretation on council meetings for those that have the disability. So hearing impaired. So I'm fully supportive of that as well. But yeah, a lot of things said tonight. I just rest on my record and the things that I want to do for this district and will continue to do for this district if I'm reelected. And I'm looking forward to that. And I ask again for your support and your vote to continue those programs that I know is important to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clayton Perry. Okay, just to summarize for everyone, I'd like to thank all of you from the Alliance that have watched this evening, and we'll also be sending out instructions on how you can view it later on so you can see the entire program without any interruption. Let's thank our candidates, Clayton Perry, Gabriel Gregory, and Ezra Johnson, for spending time with us. I learned a lot. I really did. And I think everybody else did too. And we really do appreciate the comments that you made this evening. And it was halfway civil too. So it went pretty well. So with that,
3/4.
And thank you for keeping time for us, Councilman Clamp. This meeting stands adjourned at 8:02.
Y'all have a good one. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.